So, today we're going to talk about some unique and hard things about doing HR in mission based organizations. Oftentimes, these are not for profits. As an HR consultant, I see in these not for profits a lot of employees who are giving and giving until they don't have much left to give and they're in some phase of burnout. So, how can HR break that cycle? How can we help those employees and keep our organizations effective? That's a conversation coming up right now. Hi there, I'm Andrea Adams. This is the HR Hub. On this show, we talk about anything related to HR. Please subscribe to the show or podcast to keep learning from my guests. So today, my guest is again Dimple Dhabalia. Dimple is somebody who's really making a difference. She worked in many different countries serving refugees for 18 years, I think. And I think we can all appreciate just how grueling and heartbreaking that would be and how much trauma we would see if we were doing that. Dimple, however, burned out, but instead of getting doctor's care, which maybe she did that too. But in addition to all the normal things, she also wrote a book about her experience called Tell Me My Story. And now she works about normalizing workplace mental health and healing individual trauma, as well as organizational trauma and moral injury. Hi, Dimple. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. These are heavy topics.
They can be.
How do you do this day in, day out, actually?
I have a great network of people that I rely on. So
Right.
Yeah.
And obviously a lot learned by, I suppose, the work you were doing before was a lot emotionally harder anyway, right? Like dealing with refugees the way you were.
Yeah, it was. But I think it's just as heartbreaking to be serving the people who are serving some of the most vulnerable people in the world, because there's just so much about their stories that aren't ever thought about or talked about. And, we hear about refugees and asylum seekers and, and other vulnerable populations because there's a desire to take care and as it should be. But we don't ever talk about the people actually doing the work and how it's impacting them. So,
yeah. I'm actually going to start this off from a place of your book, which I don't usually do, but you wrote this book about the trauma of providing humanitarian service, and that's what a lot of not-for-profits are doing. Can you take a couple minutes to tell us a little bit about your experience as just an example of providing critical care to people who are so desperate?
Yeah, absolutely. So I define humanitarian in the book as anyone working to alleviate pain and suffering in the world. So it does apply to a lot of different people and different professions. For me, my profession was at the crossroads of the government and humanitarian sector. So I worked in the government for 20 years, working on asylum and refugee policies and operations, which included almost 12 years in the field, actually sitting face-to-face, interviewing asylum seekers and refugees. And it was hard. I mean, it's hard work. And every day I was sitting, listening to stories of persecution and torture and trauma. What I realized as I was writing the book, though, is that as I sat face-to-face with these individuals and sitting with them in their trauma, I was actually sitting with myself in my trauma because so much of what they were telling me mirrored things that I had experienced in my own life growing up. And it didn't occur, and I thought, oh yeah, I've moved past all that, it's fine. But I didn't realize the impact that it was having. And so, so doing that work, through that work, I did have burnout at times, but one of the things that I think is really important to acknowledge is that, again, using the right terminology for things. So we lump a lot of things under burnout that aren't actually burnout.
Okay, I bet that it's not in the DSM-5, burnout.
I don't know if it is, actually. That's a good question.
Okay, I'm going to have to look. But anyways, go on, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. But so for me, the most prevalent thing for me was vicarious trauma. So vicarious trauma is where you are exposed to other people's trauma, and over time you begin to experience symptoms of that trauma as though you had experienced it yourself. So for me, it was about 6 years into the work. I was sitting in Zambia. I was on assignment. And it was the first time in my career, like my whole career, I took a lot of pride in that. Oh, I can create this wall of professionalism. I can sit here, have these conversations and, be completely stoic and, and have that distance. And it was the first time in my career that I really could not regulate my emotions during the interview. So as applicants are telling me their story, I was crying. I was having a hard time breathing. When I'd leave work, my colleagues and I would go to the bar, and so we were all like drinking a lot more than usual. And then at night I couldn't sleep, or if I did sleep, I was having incredibly visceral nightmares where I was reliving the stories that I had heard during the day, and it was scary. I felt like there was something wrong with me. The only saving grace for me was that I had started my career out at the Attorney General's office in Denver out of law school, and I had a boss there who was incredible. And our unit used to work on child abuse and neglect related issues. And so he understood how that work could impact you. And he used to make our team go through a vicarious trauma training every year. And I remember as a brand new attorney, I was just like, I don't need this. I mean, I'm fine. I can do this work. I'm strong. Like, that's the other thing we tell. I'm strong. And it's not about being strong or not. It's just over time, this work can have an impact. And especially if you've had trauma in your life at any point, you're more susceptible to it. And so because he had planted those seeds almost a decade earlier, by the time I actually got to this point in Zambia, it took me a few minutes, but finally I was just like, oh, I wonder if that's what I'm experiencing. And once I started looking it up and doing more work, I realized, yeah, okay, that's what I'm experiencing. But I very quickly realized that my organization wasn't resourced to support me. And so for me, those initial, that initial time of trying to navigate that was very isolating, and it was me doing it on my own until I finally had this realization that I couldn't be the only one experiencing this, that others in my organization had to be experiencing it too. And so I started to pivot within my organization to advocate, to start normalizing that this is a part of the work that we do, and we need to be talking about it, and we need to help educate our staff so that they can take care of themselves and each other when we're out, especially when we're out on the road and things like that. And so that's a little bit about kind of how I ended up here in this space now. It's just all been through personal experiences and feeling the need to advocate for people who will not advocate for themselves because they're busy advocating for others. So
isn't that a truth? Man, wow. You actually haven't put any responsibility either on the organization or the employee thus far. We'll get to that, and I guess we're going to get to that now because I'm wondering where the responsibility lies. Because employees in this day and age, we talk quite a bit about mental health, and we talk about boundaries, and we do that stuff. So I guess my question is it the employee's choice to give that much until they've got nothing left to give? And they just had to learn the hard way? Or is it the organization that has more responsibility than they've accepted?
I think it's both. And I think it's also complicated. So, in my book, I talk about how we go through this process of shaping and surviving and seeing and shifting and sharing. So it's this whole framework that we work through. But, and it's all about our own internal stories. But those stories are created as a result of experiences that we've had in our lives. And so those of us who choose to serve other people, we've often experienced something in our life that makes us want to give back in some way, right? And it's also, there's things that have happened in our lives or stories that we've been told by family members or community or whatever that also makes us give and give and give. And so for me, I came from a very long line of women who just that's what we were taught. Like it's your job to serve others. It's your job to take care of others. And I think this often happens for women in general, but, and so we're not really taught to have boundaries, around our time or our energy. And then we go into these spaces. And so there's the individual component. And then you got to think about the fact that our organizations are made up of individuals. So when we have a bunch of individuals who are coming in with this expectation that, like, okay, I was taught to give and give and give, we create systems within our organizations that perpetuate that and that create expectations for that. And we start to create the conditions for these kinds of occupational traumas and burnout and other things to start to exist. And so part of this is we can't change our organizations until the individuals within them start to change first. But they go so hand in hand. And so our organizations ultimately create the conditions for this to then continue. And so that's the organizational trauma piece. I talk about it as the water we're swimming in. So there's this story about these two fishes swimming along, and then they pass this older fish, and the older fish says, "Oh, hey boys, how's the water today?" And then the one fish looks at the other and says, "What the heck is water?" And so it's this idea that, these things become so normalized in our culture that we stop noticing. And we're so focused on the collective mission and doing the things that we need to do that we stop to recognize that, oh, you know what, this is not healthy. And the way that we're operating is it's not sustainable over the long term. Part of this is, organizations are going to have to change, but individuals are going to have to change to start creating that shift that we want to see.
Yeah, I think about that, and I think about some of my clients, and I don't know how not-for-profits are funded in the United States, but in Canada, they get a ton of government funding, and they get their government funding based on performance. And so, the leaders of an organization are squashed between the needs of their employees, but the need to prove that they are worth funding.
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of a system. And if employees are allowed to be less productive, then they don't get funding. The organization doesn't exist. So that's a question for you. Do you think this is going to result in less productivity once employees are like setting boundaries and they're not giving?
No, actually, I think it's the opposite. It's very counterintuitive, but the more that we create space for people to take care, and where organizations actually take care of the whole human being, not just our physical health and safety, but where they're taking care of the whole person. And we give people the agency to be grown-ups in the workplace and actually have a little bit of agency over how they're doing their work and things like that. It actually results in meeting our metrics much more efficiently. And the other thing that people don't think about, leaders don't think about in terms of the long term is, this idea that, oh, well, people can't take it, it's fine, we'll just hire more people. But every time you hire new people, there's a cost associated with training them, and that cost is usually pretty high. And I hate talking about human beings in terms of return on investment, but again, we always have to make a business case. And if you don't have an employee who's staying at least like 3 to 5 years after that training, you're not getting a return on your investment, first of all. But even bigger than that, you're not cultivating the institutional knowledge. And institutional knowledge is so important because in a lot of this work, you need people who feel comfortable in the work that they're doing and the decisions that they're making. And if you have this revolving door of people who are not staying more than a year, then you're never cultivating that. And so everything takes longer, or the decisions don't get made. And so all of that is impacting your bottom line. And so investing the time and resources up front to take care of our people actually is going to help you hit benchmarks. It's going to help productivity, and whatever other metrics that you measure by.
Hey, business owners, executive directors, are people stresses or challenges getting in your way? Imagine managing your people issues smoothly, addressing, better yet, dealing with employee problems before they're ever a big problem, adapting to all the changes in employee rules, and doing all of this easily. I can deal with your HR challenges so they're resolved. With me, you'll get the right things done, build a strong team, and create a workplace where the right people want to be. Your business deserves to thrive without a lot of HR hassle. I'm here to help you make that happen. With my assistance, you can focus on business growth supported by a strong team. Take a first step towards a better business today. Reach out and let's chat. Visit thehrhub.ca and let's begin transforming your people challenges.
So we've already talked about this a bit, but can you sort of succinctly say what is the responsibility, in your opinion, of the organization and the leaders of that organization?
Yeah, sure. So again, I talk about this need for a holistic, human-centered duty of care. And so duty of care historically has focused on the legal obligations that an organization has to provide a safe and healthy workplace.
Yes.
But we want to look at, especially in mission-driven organizations where we're often working in service of other people, we want to look at a duty of care that goes beyond that and actually looks at the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, the relational, the whole human being when it comes to creating a duty of care, so that it actually helps the person show up fully to do the work and be in community with others during the workday to meet the mission ultimately.
There's so many moving parts in dealing with people.
Yeah.
The employer can do their best, but then this person has all kinds of stuff going on at home. It just seems like a tall order.
Well, but I think this is the thing, is the whole thing with the Industrial Revolution is they were trying to create efficiency, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was efficiency in these spaces where they were creating like a single item, and it was like a workshop type, call it a factory setting. But that concept of efficiency and productivity that was created at that time has been applied across the board, across all professions, and it doesn't work, because part of this is recognizing, again, that we have human beings working in our workplaces, and being human is messy, and serving humanity is even messier. And so part of this is, organizations, like, we have to move away from this idea that it's just purely about productivity or it's purely about profit. And again, those metrics are important, but if we aren't recognizing the humanity of the workforce, it's not going to be sustainable over the long run.
So how do you see employers making situations worse for their employees? Actually, there's just going to be so many examples, but generalize.
Again, I think it's everything we've been talking about, right? I think it's when employers are solely, creating policies and practices based on the metrics that they ultimately want to meet. So, for example, during COVID was a great example. In my organization, we were at the start of COVID. People are scared. They don't understand what's happening. All of a sudden, everybody's working from home. And our organization doubled down on productivity measures, where it was like, well, everybody's working from home now, so they should be able to be more productive. And so if we're not acknowledging, what people are actually dealing with, this does make it worse. So if that's like your only driving force and that's all you look at, that definitely makes it worse. The other thing that makes things worse is this expectation that, your health and well-being is on your own time. When, we spend so much of our time and energy at work, and then we've got family lives and all these other things. And so this expectation that people should now take additional time from somewhere on their own to deal with their own health and well-being issues it's really unfair. And again, these things do not have to take hours. We can build in literally 2 minutes things throughout the day where people can have an opportunity to reset their nervous system and actually get back into a better place, like better mental state, so they can be focused and be productive, rather than thinking that, oh, they have to sit at their desk for 8 hours a day, because our brains don't work that way, and that's not going to be helpful. And so the more that organizations can be proactive in helping to create these spaces, it's just going to serve them better, which in turn is going to allow them to serve the clients that they're serving better.
So HR in mission-based organizations, what should they be doing?
Look, like, we all are able to influence. Doesn't matter what your title is, doesn't matter what your level is. And so, again, the more that we get to know ourselves and understand ourselves, and as HR, professionals, the more that you can help to influence the organization towards becoming more human-centered rather than just metrics-driven. I think in the long run, that's going to be really helpful. So bringing in people to, do talks and workshops and trainings around different concepts that are related to human-centered leadership, or human-centered cultures. The more that we can bring, integrate mindfulness-based practices into the day, the more that we can help our leaders understand that they don't have to micromanage everyone, but that they can actually trust that their staff is going to do what they need to do. Helping them understand how to have the hard conversations. I think performance conversations cause a lot of anxiety, and I've never understood why, because they don't need to. And so everything that I've ever done with leaders, we talk about things being a two-way conversation. So teaching our leaders, as HR professionals, helping them understand that curiosity is such an important part of being a leader. So how do we help them build that into how they lead others, and have those conversations, those performance conversations in real time, and have them be two-way conversations. I think these are all areas where HR professionals could be helpful.
There's lots in there where HR can be helpful, because you're touching on so many of the things that we bring in. So that was great. I'm going to bring this conversation to a close, because I think we're running out of time. If there's HR professionals out there who want to learn more about this to get the full picture, what do you suggest?
Well, I am going to plug my books, Tell Me My Story, Challenging the Narrative of Service Before Self. This is laid out in there. But also I have a podcast called Service Without Sacrifice, Conversations on Hope and Healing, which provides a lot of this information, where I'm in conversation with other leaders from different sectors. So I think there's a lot of really great information in there. I also have a podcast called What Would Ted Lasso Do? So that one looks at leadership through the lens of, it looks at some of the lessons from the popular TV show Ted Lasso through the lens of leadership and positive psychology. So a lot of the same messages, but definitely a more fun angle for that. And then I've got kind of an information hub online at Dear Humanitarian on Substack. So that's another place that people can find it. And then, of course, please feel free to reach out at my website, which is rootsintheclouds.com. So I'm obviously just one resource. There are plenty of other resources out there. But I would love to have a conversation if people are interested and would like to learn more.
Perfect. All right. I'll put links to all of that in the show notes. Well, thanks, Dimple. I'm thinking about the part where you talked about effectiveness, and that doing these things, in fact, won't make our organization less effective. And HR, that's what we're here to do. I would encourage you to check out some of Dimple's resources. Dimple and I did another episode related to being trauma-informed at work, and the link to that is right here. Thanks for watching out there. We'll see you next time.